From Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Mark Summers, and now, here's your host, Dan Harary.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to From Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Dan Harary, your lovely host, recording from beautiful downtown Beverly Hills. This is my office, and I hope everyone's doing well. I have a very special guest today. She's a new friend of mine, and I'll go right into it. My guest today is Debbie Gendler. Debbie's a 4-time Emmy Award-nominated talent and development executive and producer, formerly worked at CBS in New York and in LA, and she also worked at ABC. She was later responsible for developing over 9,000 episodes of television with a company called Weller Grossman Productions. As one of the very first Beatles fans in the United States, Debbie was in the studio audience for that group's first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show in February 1964. I was 7. I saw that show with my mother, and I was 7. My mother was pregnant with my brother, who is 60-something now. Debbie has given countless interviews about the Beatles on television, radio, and podcasts, and she was also included on the CBS TV's 50th Beatles Anniversary Show. Debbie's interview was also appeared on the DVD of Ron Howard's 2016 documentary film called 8 Days a Week. Published in 2024, Debbie's book, I Saw Them Standing There, which I have right here, and I've read twice. Excellent, excellent book. Her book is included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame archives and library. Today, Debbie works as a research consultant and a co-producer at SOFA, S-O-F-A Entertainment, which owns the Ed Sullivan Show catalog. Debbie and I both attended Boston University, not at the same time, but we're both BU alumni. And I read a big article about her and her book a few months ago in a copy of our school magazine called Bostonia magazine. And then since Debbie lives near me in Beverly Hills, we met a few months ago at a local deli, and we became friends, and that's where she gifted me a copy of her book. Also, because this is a paranormal show, Debbie believes a UFO may have landed in her backyard in Beverly Hills, where she lives with her husband. I believe this happened a few years ago, so she has a wonderful story about a possible UFO landing. So we'll talk Beatles and Hollywood and UFOs with Debbie Gendler. And if I don't screw this up horribly, here she comes. Hello there.
Hi, Dan. How are you?
Good. I'm fine. How did I do? Did I do
Great.
okay?
Absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for doing my dopey show. Okay, so let's just start. I always ask my guests first question. Where are you from originally? What did your parents do? And tell us a little bit about your early childhood.
Okay. Well, basically, I grew up in a small town in northwest Bergen County, New Jersey, called Oakland. Very, very sort of blue-collar kind of town. And lived there until I left for college. My dad was active in my mother's family business in clothing manufacturing. However, he was a Civil War aficionado, got degrees in Civil War and in history, and was an adjunct instructor at Princeton on Civil War and Reconstruction. My claim to fame as a child before Beatles was every spring vacation, I visited Civil War battlefields from Vicksburg to Bull Run. And so I know my Civil War and Reconstruction history really well. My mom was, I don't know, I guess you'd say a homemaker, housewife, although She really wasn't. She was an active mom in organizations and, wasn't really, she never baked. I always wanted home baked cupcakes or cookies like everyone else. And she would always say, there's also an art to being able to identify a good bakery. So that's how, that was a little bit of my youth.
Sounds like a Jewish mother, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The joke. What did Jewish women make for dinner? Reservations.
Right.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. So your early childhood, you were following your father. Did your father have those little Civil War, those little soldiers on little platforms with little cannons and all that?
Oh, all of that. But,
Wow.
In the days I was already living in LA, and before the day I inherited a lot of his library, some of the books are right behind me, actually, of just wonderful memoirs of U.S. Grant and whatever. But people are a marvel. In my living room, right at the foot of the fireplace, is a little Civil War cannonball.
Wow.
From the Battle of Little Round Top, Gettysburg, that did not explode. Could you imagine? I carried that. It probably weighs about 10 pounds. I carried that in the old days on a plane from New Jersey to LA, never thinking, oh my goodness, this could explode on the plane.
Oh my God.
But I did. I took it with me the years before TSA and everything. And it sits down here, the cannonball from the Civil War.
Hopefully it never will explode. Imagine the middle of the night, you and your husband wake up and you hear that.
Right. I hope it stays intact. But I figured now all these years it hasn't exploded. It's not going to.
Quick side question. Do you believe in reincarnation at all?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I never really spent time thinking about that.
The reason I ask is that it sounds almost perhaps like your dad had some affiliation with the Civil War in some way. He may have been a soldier in a past life. And
you know what? Maybe he loved studying and writing about and teaching about the U.S. Civil War. I do wonder, not about anything else, but the fact that and not to make this political at all, Dan, but what he would be thinking now about the divisiveness in America. And I've heard some parallels between, Civil War, and he was truly a student, and was on the side of the Union, right? But
I would hope so. Yeah,
being a New Yorker,
yeah,
was born and grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. The guy knew also a good, deli sandwich at Katz's Deli.
When my parents were dating, they used to go to Katz's Deli. I have a funny story about Katz's, so I won't bring it up now.
Okay.
All right, so you're very well known for your Beatles history and your affection for them, your involvement, your loyalty to them. You've been friends with Paul, I know, for many, many years. Tell us briefly, how did you first become exposed? I think it was your babysitter. How did you first become exposed to the Beatles? And then how did that evolve into you meeting Brian Epstein?
Okay. Well, as briefly as I can make it, I had a babysitter, and I wouldn't really refer to her as a babysitter. She mostly, as I said, my mom was very active in organizations and things, even though she didn't go to a formal job. And so she was rarely home when I got home from school. So her best friend's daughter would come and just sit in our house after school. She was like a senior in high school, and I was just 12, 13, just turned 13. And her parents went on a trip to England. They knew that their daughter every afternoon would watch American Bandstand with me. And so they figured, I must love music, right?
Okay.
Because I sit there and I watch American Bandstand all the time. Well, that really wasn't true, but hey, it was enough for them to go into a record store that they passed in London and ask the clerk there, what's the most popular record? What's selling best? And he goes, oh, from this group, the Beatles. And he handed them a Please Please Me album. They brought it home to me. And I remember what it looked like before I opened it. It was in this brown, sort of oily textured paper tied with a little string. And I thought, what is this,
Yeah.
So I opened it up and I took a look at the album cover and I saw the four cutest guys that I had ever seen. I went like, oh, I could not believe how adorable they were.
And this is before you heard any of their music.
Oh, yeah. And this was the end of April 1963. Total unknowns.
Right.
I thought I had never heard of them on American Bandstand. They weren't on that show. I didn't know of them. And I went and I played the album really the next day because I had a Spanish test that next day. So I really had to go and study my Spanish.
You remember. That's a good memory you have.
Yeah. Oh, believe me. You know how you remember certain things. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, so I could clear out my brain and didn't have to remember all this stuff.
That's great. I love that.
And so I started to play the music. And I desperately tried to find friends. I was in 7th grade. I desperately tried to find friends to love the Beatles, to look at them and see the album and listen. And no one liked them. In sheer desperation, on part of the receipt that they gave me for the record, because it was cute, because it was written in shillings and pounds. They didn't even have the decimal system at that point yet. There was a thing attached, like if you want to join their fan club. So I thought, hey, I need to find someone who I can connect with this group. And so I wrote a letter to the fan club. And that was probably very early May 1963.
Okay.
I never heard anything back. I would go to sleepaway camp in Maine every year, and we would take trips. And I remember distinctly one trip, we went to Franconia Notch, New Hampshire, during the summer to go to this ski resort and ride the lift up and down and whatever. And at the end, everyone went to the store and bought postcards to send home to their families,
right,
except for me. I remembered the address of the Beatles fan club, and I sent my postcard. I remember I bought 3 5-cent stamps because I didn't know how much a postcard would cost. And so I wrote airmail, and instead of the 5-cent, mine had 3 5-cent stamps. And I wrote, Dear Beatles fan club, remember me, Debbie Gendler, Oakland, New Jersey. Remember me.
Incredible.
And I sent it, and I still never heard anything back until it was Halloween weekend that year. All trick-or-treating going
months later.
October, at the very end, October, Halloween.
Right.
And I came home from school that day, and my mom was standing at the door holding a yellow piece of paper, a Western Union telegram from a lawyer's office in New York City to me, asking me to call the office to discuss Beatle fan club, and the Beatles were coming to America. So I got my mother to phone the office on my behalf, and she spoke to them. And fortunately, she agreed to let me go. Manhattan was like 26 miles away from my town, across the George Washington Bridge.
Sure.
And so my dad on that appointed day in early November, drove me across the bridge and to the law office of Walter Hoffer. He was Brian's attorney in New York City
Brian
at
Epstein.
the time. Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager.
Right.
And my dad drove me, and I went with him upstairs to the lawyer's office. I remember it was on 55th Street at the time. And I walked in, was greeted, my dad and I, and to the left of me in a conference room with a big oval table stood 3 British men talking with the most beautiful, beautiful accents. And I was ushered in and introduced. This is Brian Epstein. Stein. I wasn't quite sure. So I said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Epstein." And he said, "I will tell you, it is Epstein, not Epstein."
Epstein is
From
more
that
refined.
point on, he
More
was
refined.
always Brian Epstein. And the 3 gentlemen there looked at me, and they wanted to meet some American fans because they were busy planning the Beatles' arrival to America. And they wanted to be sure that there were teenage fans there for the Beatles. But the Beatles weren't known yet. But they must have gotten my address or retained it there in London at the fan club, because I got that telegram. And that's how I met Brian. And it was from there that they saw I wasn't obviously old enough to work professionally, but I was that 13-year-old teenager. When I left, Walter Hoffer's secretary, the meeting took probably 15 to 20 minutes at most.
Okay.
The secretary to Walter Hoffer called me over, said, wanted to make sure my phone number, my address. He said, "Walter Hoffer will be needing me in the future for sure."
But let me ask you this question. Were you surprised that you were the only young person in the room?
No, I really wasn't surprised. I thought it was like a business meeting, you know?
Yeah, but you're 13-year-old girl with your father. You would think that they would have assembled at least a dozen other Debbie Gendlers. You know what I mean? Like, there must have been other girls that wrote. Were you the only one that wrote the fan club?
I don't know.
It's an incredible story.
I don't know how many people knew to write the fan club before the Beatles ever came to New York. So that's how I got my ticket to the Ed Sullivan show, because Walter Hoffer's secretary said, if the deal gets firmed later this afternoon, when Mr. Epstein goes to meet Ed Sullivan at his home, or actually I came to learn hotel at the Delmonico Hotel, it's confirmed, we will send you a ticket to go see them on the show as a thank you. That's how I got my ticket.
So you were not at, was it JFK Airport? No, it wasn't JFK Airport.
Yes, it was already JFK.
Oh, yeah,
I
JFK
did a little research just to be sure on that. It became JFK actually on December 26, 1963. It was renamed from Idlewild very quickly after the assassination.
Okay, so you did not go. I think you had didn't you have a test at school that day? Is that why you didn't go to the airport?
You know what? No, I don't really know the reason why I didn't go, but I was in New Jersey. This was all the way at the airport. It was a Friday afternoon. I would have needed my parents to drive me there. It wasn't to that point for me. And I knew at that point I was going to see them at the Ed Sullivan show. However, the next day on Saturday, I did go to the Plaza Hotel, and I did stand in front, right by the fountain, in front of the entrance to the plaza, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Beatles.
Did you see them?
No, I did not that Saturday.
Okay.
No. But I was there for about between 3 and 4 hours. And I remember the kids, some kids taking off, running after them. I got there about 10:30 in the morning, running after them to Central Park for a photo op that we all heard. And then even more so at around 1:30 in the afternoon, a whole group left us standing in front of the hotel because they ran down 58th Street to go to the Ed Sullivan Theater, where three of them were rehearsing. George was sick
Right.
with a sore throat, actually strep from what I've heard since, strep throat in the hotel.
I think he had 102 fever or something. He
Yeah,
was quite. It's amazing he pulled off that performance, man. You'd never
Yes.
know. When he does that little shuffle, you'd never know he was sick that night.
Yeah.
So you met Mr. Epstein the day that he made a deal with the Ed Sullivan show. I mean, your timing was beshert. I mean, it's just remarkable that you were there that same day.
And Dan, I just want to add briefly that it was Veterans Day. My school was closed. That's what made it really easy to go. It was Veterans Day. And schools were closed in, 1963, November, for Veterans Day.
Yeah, it's before JFK was killed, right?
Yes, right before.
It's very sweet that your parents were so supportive of you. Number one. Number two, did you take the Please Please Me album to school with you to show it around, or did you keep it at home?
Well, before the Beatles came, I took it to school with me all the time, but I ended up, there was no interest. I just left it at home. But the day after the Ed Sullivan show, first appearance on Sullivan,
right.
I walked into school, and it was Monday morning, and I thought, oh, whatever. And I was told immediately when I walked through the door, I was being called to the vice principal's office. Now, the vice principal was the school disciplinarian. I so remember his name, Eugene Casaleggio.
Okay. Named
Yeah, Mr. Casaleggio. And I walked into his office and I thought, oh no, what did I do now? What? Right. And he said to me, I heard that you have an album of the Beatles from England. Could you bring it to school tomorrow? And we will play it in the cafeteria during lunch.
Oh, that's incredible.
So I went from being, and what I didn't really add is, through all this time, I was greatly ridiculed in my town in New Jersey. Tremendously ridiculed. Because someone walked up to my mother in the Grand Union and told her to please keep me away from their daughter, that I'm trying to influence them in a bad way with these Beatles, with these guys. She just called them guys with long hair, my mom told me. And I'm doing bad stuff, and please, I cannot be friends with her daughter any longer. And so I wasn't friends. So there was a lot of hostility. So I went from being shunned, and I mean, I am not exaggerating, to the day after the Ed Sullivan show, my basement became Beatles Central. Everyone wanted to be friends with me. In the cafeteria at lunch, the trays when I sat down, whereas before I had my 2 or 3 friends that I sat with. Yeah. Suddenly, these people who never spoke to me, like the real popular kids, suddenly sat down and wanted to have lunch with me. It was just unbelievable.
It's a remarkable story. Okay, so take us through the Ed Sullivan show that you attended. How you got into the theater, what it was like in the theater, what it was like to see them live. Give us that experience.
Okay, well, it was this time my mom drove me, not my father. My mom drove me to New York and parked, and it was already getting cold with that feeling of snow in the air.
It was February.
We went across 51st Street to Broadway, and by then we could see kids running on the the streets. And when we made a left turn to go up to the theater, it wasn't called Ed Sullivan Theater yet. It was called Studio 50. Studio 50 came and we made a left turn going up, and there were barricades already, horses, police officers on horses, directing the crowd and where to stand. And we got stopped by one of those police officers. Now, my mom, who would admit to being 5'2", I don't think she was. I'd say she was probably more like 5'1". Okay.
Little person.
Was there looking up at this officer on horseback. I mean, the guy was like really up there. And he was giving us a hard time. And my mom showed we have a ticket and got into a little bit more in-depth conversation with him. And finally he said, okay, fine. My mom gave me a little push. Some kids tugged on my coat. I went in through the vestibule. They grabbed my ticket. No one has a ticket who was in that audience.
Yeah.
They confiscated every single ticket. Although I have heard that one ticket does exist, and that belonged to Walter Cronkite, who brought his 2 daughters to the show. But he retained one of the tickets because he didn't have to give his in. But no one knows where that one ticket is.
Imagine what that would be worth.
Yes, unbelievable. So anyway, I was ushered in and sent up to the mezzanine. Now, I was really upset because people were coming in, getting out of cars, lots of kids, and all going to the orchestra level. Right. And I was sent up the stairs. But I figured, hey, I just should be happy I'm here. And I went upstairs and I was given a seat and I sat down and had all these plans to really act in a very sophisticated way.
At 13.
I was going to be grown up.
Right.
Right behind me were 4 girls sitting. One of whom I'm actually in touch with now, who lives in Wilmington, Delaware. We found each other. And she remembers me sitting down in front of her because they were there, and me turning around and like looking at them, not screaming, and all of a sudden jumping up and down with them. She just so totally remembers that. And then, there was like a lot of hubbub going on the stage and people walking with folders back and forth. And then we were told by Ed Sullivan, we could hear the opening music and just everything like that. I remember an Anison commercial on the monitor and thinking to myself, wow, when this is over, the people that work on the show are really going to need an Anison. I just so remember
That's very funny. Were the monitors color or black and white? Do you remember?
Black and white.
Black and white, yeah.
Yeah, black and white, yeah.
Okay.
And then Ed Sullivan announced, and here they are, ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles. And they like walked on the stage, and it was like, oh my God. It was, I still even relating it to you. I haven't thought about this in a little bit of time. It still takes my breath away, to be honest with you. That first sighting. The mezzanine proved to be a wonderful seat.
Right.
Because the booms and everything below would be blocking a lot of people's view. Okay. But we, sitting on the mezzanine, were almost level with their shoulders. And we could see right through. And all the expressions, and if you watch the show, you can see the Beatles' reactions, especially to us in the mezzanine, where there was a lot of screaming and jumping and just sheer pandemonium. And you can take a look at that appearance, especially the first 3 songs. For All My Loving, Until There Was You. You can take a look and see the screams and the Beatles all looking up, just playing to us.
Sure.
It was electric. electric.
It was a life-defining moment for you. It was a
And,
religious
and
experience.
many others.
Yeah. It's fantastic that you had the good fortune to be there, to see history, to see that night.
Yeah.
I was 7. I was in the kitchen. My mother was pregnant in the den, laying down with my brother would be born a few months later. She goes, "Danny, come here. I think you might like this." I'm 7, so I'm a little younger than you. And I
Yeah.
came out from the kitchen, and I saw and I remember it said under John, it said, "Sorry, girls, he's married." And I watched it and I thought, "Oh, this is very interesting. This is very interesting." And then my mother bought me the Meet the Beatles album.
Oh,
And then I had that for a while. But for me, I'm a little late, Debbie. For me, it was the Monkees. 2 years later, 66, it was the Monkees. What I had for the Monkees is what you had for the Beatles. The Monkees changed my life. I became a drummer, and it altered the course of my life to go into the entertainment field. So,
well, there was a monkey to be on the show that night.
I was going to ask
So
you, yeah.
I
Do you
saw a
remember? Yeah,
monkey.
Davy Jones. Do you
Right.
remember his play?
Oh, yes, I do. I remember every act. Fred Garps, the magician, Mitzi McCall and Charlie Brill, Frank Gorshin. I remember sitting through them all. And let me tell you, it was torturous, okay? Knowing that the Beatles were right behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You could have seen the whole show could have been just the Beatles, of course. But you remember Davy Jones singing and dancing around.
Yes.
Wow. Isn't that amazing that Davy Jones, a monkey was on the same stage with the Beatles?
I know, right?
That's also quite remarkable.
Yeah.
Tell me the story. You went to a press conference and you did something very funny that you put some souvenirs in your purse. And then when you met the Beatles and how that all played out.
Okay. Well, in 1964, as this Walter Hoffer's office said, I would be called upon to do a lot of things, which I was. I was called upon to go on a local New York TV show that was pretty popular in the tri-state area called The Clay Cole Show. And I did things on that on a regular basis, representing Beatle Fan Club. I staged an overnight sleep-in on Broadway in front of the Astor Theater to promote A Hard Day's Night premiere in the summer of 1964. When the tickets first went on sale, I organized a group of 11 people sleeping over, 11 fans sleeping over on the sidewalk in sleeping bags. Police were there, but it was still a pretty rowdy night. Anyway, and so after all these things, I happened to be at Beatles Fan Club that was run out of Walter Hoffer's law office for about the first 18 months of the Beatles' arrival. And Brian Epstein was visiting and planning actually another one of his acts visit to the U.S., and that was Cilla Black.
Right.
And he said to me, well, when you met the Beatles, I said, no, I didn't meet the Beatles. He goes, you didn't meet them when they were here? And that was not the first trip, but when they were here in the summer tour, August 1964. They did a big summer tour as well, although the 65 one with Shea Stadium and stadiums is the most famous. They still did a big tour in the summer of 64.
Right.
And I said, no, I didn't meet them during that tour. He goes, well, you are going to be the first team to welcome the Beatles when they come back to America later this year. And sure enough, through a whole lengthy thing, I was. And I really detail it. I don't want to promote my book, but yet I'd love people to read it,
Oh, of course. Your book is wonderful.
But, and I talk about how I really, really got there through, thank you, through Sid Bernstein and hard work at the fan club and everything like that. So I got my invite to go to welcome the Beatles to America. It was Friday, August 13th. They flew.
Friday the 13th.
It was Friday the 13th, August 13th, 1965. I was there waiting for the Beatles to arrive at the Warwick Hotel in New York City, direct from London. And they arrived, they went through a revolving door, and Paul tripped a little bit, actually fell into my mother. I was extremely jealous of my mother. That was bad.
Yeah, to this day, you've never forgiven your mother,
No,
right?
really, no. That how could that be? There's revolving door, a little platform like, and then 3 steps, and going in so quickly, tripped on the last step, and my mother was there standing next to me. Anyway, they were ushered right up to their suite in the elevator banks to the 33rd floor. I and the other press people who were there, and there was lots of press, were told to walk up to the mezzanine there and go into this room called the Warwick Room. I went in. I was shown to my seat where I was to sit. It was wonderful. I was like right in the first row. That was until a bunch of drunk newspaper people came in and like pushed their way right into next to me, including good old cousin Bruce Morrow, cousin Brucey.
Right. You have a whole
from
story about him in your book.
Who sat right next to me.
Right.
And elbowed me through the whole thing to get out of the way. The Beatles came in, did the press conference, which lasted a half hour, and then everyone left. And I was told, remain in your seat and you'll be brought up to their suite to really officially welcome them, meet them, whatever.
Right. Okay.
So I was sitting in my seat, which was right across now because there was no one sitting in front of me or stooping down low in front of me. And there was their trash. An ashtray full of cigarette butts and ashes. An empty cigarette thing that was twisted because there were none left, but it was twisted, left sitting, and I believe it was Ringo's. A napkin used by George Harrison, and a glass where Paul McCartney was drinking from. There were actually 2 glasses. George had one and Paul had another. And I'm sitting there and there's no one around me and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, You know, by now, this was August 65. I mean, the Beatles were an entity.
Oh,
They
yeah.
were
The
something.
biggest stars
we
on
were,
the planet Earth. Yeah.
right. We were collecting everything in every magazine and every doll and piece of memorabilia. And there in front of me was all their trash that they had used. So I thought, will I always regret this moment not taking their stuff? And I suddenly said, okay. I took my bag. Still remember it was beige. It was about this big
So funny.
and had handles on top because I had enough room for my little camera, my Instamatic camera.
Yeah, you took
the
photos
thing
of
with
that.
flash bulbs,
Yeah.
Sylvania flash
Is
bulbs.
it the one that turned the 4 times?
That you had to put in each one with a flash bulb in and out.
Yeah.
And had enough room and my pad because I had written questions to ask them if I had an opportunity, which I didn't. But I had everything in there. So I went up and the first thing I took was the Ringo cigarette pack. Then the ashtray full of the cigarette butts, boom, in. The napkin on top of all that. And then I suddenly heard like the freight door from the elevator open on the side sort of in front of me and to the right. And I could sort of hear steps on the concrete floor. And I looked at the glass of water. Oh no, there was about 1.5 inches of water left in the glass. I said, oh, who cares? I just took the glass, boom, put it in. And then the girl said, oh, we're all ready for you. Let's go. So I picked up a couple of things. There was a press kit that for the movie Help that they had handed out to everyone.
Do you still have that? Do you still have it?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And I turned around and picked it up and got led to the freight elevator, went up. I got there and there was a commotion when I got off the elevator. There was a girl who had climbed the first few floors in the Warwick Hotel, the fire escape, and then managed to get into the service elevator and found her way to the 33rd floor. So hotel security and New York police were taking her from like the window. She was standing by the window, leading her down. And I arrived and I was like worried I was going to get caught up in her whole thing. Meanwhile, George Harrison stuck his head around the corner and he was there. And I said, "Oh, hello." And it was George, and nodded hello very, very nicely, very, very nicely welcoming. And then the girl who worked for Sid Bernstein, the promoter, brought me in. And sure enough, there were the Beatles standing. George nodded hello, but we were already friends. We had met 90 seconds before.
Right, you're old friends, right.
And then Paul very, very, very nicely shook my hand. I so remember he seemed so happy to be in America. Okay. So happy. And then next on the other side was John. And John was sort of standing a bit apart and was looking down. And I went, "What's he looking at?" And I went up to him and he, instead of saying hello to me, pointed with his finger. He goes, "What's that?" Well, in the seam of my bag, dark, ash-ridden water from the seam was dripping onto the carpeting in the suite. And I looked at it and I thought, oh no. I practically started to cry, okay?
I understand.
I was in an absolute, I was 15 years old though now, okay? I was in a sheer panic, finally meeting my idols. He goes, "Okay, come here, open it up." I stood there in front of him and he went through the bag. He goes, "It's rubbish." I said, "No, it's not rubbish. It's for my collection. It's for my collection." He goes, "No, it's rubbish and you are rubbish girl."
That's so mean.
That's what he called me.
So cruel.
And that's what I wanted to call the title of my book, Rubbish Girl. But the publisher said, "No, who, Rubbish Girl?" But I told them, whoever got a nickname given to them by John Lennon, I was Rubbish Girl. Anyway, that's it. I got saved, though, by sandwiches because they were hungry. Remember, they had come from England, come right in, upstairs, press conference. This was immediately after. This was around, 6:15 or so. And they had landed at 2:30. And sandwiches came in from the stage deli. Big sandwiches.
Sure,
and they were all so hungry. That's how I got out of.
Did you meet Ringo that day or no?
No, not really.
Okay.
No.
All right. I love all your Beatles stories, and we could do this for hours, but I don't want to run out of time.
Okay.
So I want to ask you, we're jumping ahead now decades and decades in time. You and your husband live in Beverly Hills, not far from where I live.
Yes.
And when we had our deli lunch recently, you told me a wonderful story that you think perhaps something out of the ordinary landed in your backyard. So please give us, first of all, what was the time frame, and give me that story because it was wonderful.
Okay, well, when I heard a primary interest of yours is UFOs and landings, I had to share my story because I have told it before and it met with great disdain. So I was really happy to be able to share it with you and your viewers, listeners. Okay. On my house, the trees in the backyard of my house were really on the side, and I had a fairly open, very easily accessible to the backyard. However, I also had a converted garage, which was my sort of art studio workspace. The year I've been able to identify was 1996.
Okay.
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 And I, that night, had been out there till about 10:30 at night. I had taken the trash out to the alley. I went in. There were glass sliding doors. I didn't keep the doors locked, though. There wasn't anything of value. Opened it in. I went in. I got something that I needed in the house. Closed the door. Went in at 10:30. The next day, I got up in the morning. It was really in the morning, French doors in my bedroom. And I look out every morning, and all of a sudden that morning from 10:30 at night to I'd say about 7:30, not after that, because my daughter had to get up and go to school. So 7:30, in the middle of my backyard was a round circle of burned out grass. But I mean burned out in a perfect circle. I would say it was probably 12 to 15 feet in diameter.
Huge.
It was
huge.
large.
Huge, yeah.
Large.
And it wasn't there. And it wasn't there the night before.
And it wasn't there at 10:30 at night.
Right.
It was not there, and at 7:30 it was.
Incredible.
I took my Polaroid camera, actually. I had a Polaroid. It was so unusual that I took the camera and went out and I took some Polaroid shots of it because I wanted to have it on record.
Sure.
I also, later that day, started to develop a terrible cough. But I mean an awful cough, Dan, where it was like I really didn't feel well suddenly by that afternoon. I couldn't figure it out. But the next day, I was outside still marveling. When I would put my hand on the total brown grass, it was dry and hot. When on the green part, it was wet and cold.
Amazing.
But it was dried out, dried brown. I showed my husband. My husband, no, it's probably some fertilizer.
I said, perfect round circle. No way.
Fertilizer? No. I said, I just couldn't go for it.
Right.
It's not fertilizer in a perfect, like a circle like that. And I said, look at the pictures, and look at it in reality. He did feel it, and he could feel that it was hot and brown. He could. So anyway, the next day, where I'm not feeling so well, I go outside, and it was like a gate fence between us, not a concrete, with my next door neighbor,
okay,
Dorothy. Dorothy hears me outside, and her little dog, Susie, comes running. Susie, a little white dog. And Dorothy says to me, what was going on in your house last night? I said, Dorothy,
what are you talking about?
What do you mean? She goes, it was around 3:15 in the morning. There was a lot of noise in the backyard.
Wow.
And Susie was so agitated. She had never been as agitated as ever before. And she, with her paws, was at the back door, literally with the nails. You could see the marks she made in that back door, which was literally maybe 20 feet, no more than that, with the steps right next to the fence and then the burned out area, trying desperately to get out.
So the dog woke up your neighbor in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Because something remarkable was
Something
happening in your backyard.
In my backyard. And Dorothy asked me, what was going on in the night in your yard?
Amazing.
And I said, Dorothy, look over here. Look at this. She goes, yeah, this is probably something happened back here. She didn't say UFO or anything. She goes, something happened because Susie was so agitated. Meanwhile, and me, I got sicker and sicker and sicker. I would honestly say that I had, now looking back at it, I had symptoms like people who have long COVID. Wow. That's what I would liken it on to.
Okay.
3 months of feeling sick.
Wow.
I had a friend who I told many people about this. I didn't keep quiet. I went to work at my TV production company, and one of the producers I had shown the Polaroids to, and everyone pretty much marveled at it. About 2 years later, this same producer went to work on the Lisa show.
Right.
Lisa Gibbons had her own daytime talk show.
Sure.
And this friend went to be a segment producer on the show. And they had booked someone from SETI. Is that what it's called?
SETI, S-E-T, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence.
She remembered my Polaroids. So she called me on the phone. She said, can we use your Polaroids on the show? And I said, sure, absolutely. So I wrote up a paragraph or two, what happened, and I gave her the Polaroids. They were given to the man from SETI. I wasn't on the show with him. He was the main guest.
Okay.
And he had my Polaroids. My Polaroids have never been returned.
Yeah, that's a shame. You asked your friend, obviously the segment producer, and she never could never get them back to you.
She said that they were lost. They were there. She couldn't find them on the set.
They may have been confiscated.
I don't know. And I still look around my house, and I've even moved since then, and I look around, and it's not like me because I'm like a memorabilia collector type person. I have that collector's, mentality, even old sheet music I'll keep. So, it's not like I'm like that giving or scatterbrained a person that I would give away something. So I still keep thinking, did I retain at least one of the Polaroids that I took? And if so, where is it? And I keep looking for it all the time. Did I put it in a book for safekeeping and then put it on a shelf? I don't know.
The key would be to find that Lisa episode.
Yes.
Maybe if it's on YouTube, and then if they showed your pictures, you'd have it on video.
Exactly. And I know who the segment producer is. She lives up in the Seattle area now.
Maybe she has a copy of her shows.
Maybe she does. And I have gone online, though, and tried to find Lisa, spelled Leeza, if any of your people there, Lisa, and a show on UFOs or SETI or expert on UFOs or anything. I've tried to look for that episode.
Yeah.
But I can't see.
I tried to. I don't think it's there. But you should ask her if your friend kept.
I will. Thank you. I will let you know.
So you were ill for what, 3 months?
3 months.
Now, didn't you tell me when you told me the story that in retrospect, you think perhaps you had gone outside in the middle of that night? Tell me about that part. Tell me that part.
Yes. I thought in the night I may have gone outside, but don't remember it. And that's why I got so ill. I had the doors in my bedroom that I would use to go in and out, these French doors that opened out. And I remember even looking at my feet in the morning, and they were a little like dirty. They weren't like how my feet normally
So
were.
it sounds like you
So
were
I thought
outside.
maybe,
Yeah.
maybe I went outside. But I must tell you, I have no real memory of that. The way, and I can't substantiate that the way I absolutely can tell you the burned out grass in the circle and the agitation and the noise that my neighbor heard.
Have you ever been hypnotized, Debbie, to try to remember that night?
No, I never have.
Is that something you'd be willing to do?
I don't know.
Because I know one of the world's foremost hypnotherapists
Really?
for abductees. She lives in it's north of Burbank. Yvonne Smith. She's world famous. Yes,
Really?
she might be able
I
to.
don't know. I might be frightened. I've worked in reality, well, not reality as we know it, but informational how to. We've had hypnotists on, we've had all of that I've worked with them as a producer point of view. I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready.
Specializes
I'll
in.
let you know.
All right, I'll email you her link, and if you want an intro, I mean, I've done it myself. She's a world famous hypnotherapist. She does regressions on people who believe they've been abducted or visited or taken, who have extraordinary experiences but can't remember, like you. And Debbie, something happened to you that night.
Yes, it did.
Clearly.
I know that I was visited because I was outside at 10:30 and the grass was fine. And by 7:15 in the morning, and Dorothy next door pinned the excessive noise and the agitation in around 3:15.
And she said, "What the hell were you?" She probably thought you and your husband were having a party or something.
I don't know. Yeah, like something outside. But Dan, I wish I had those Polaroids.
Oh, me too.
Because I can't tell you. I have almost everything in my life. I have that telegram from,
when you were 13 or 12.
United Artists asking me to sleep on the street. I have all the memorabilia from the thing. I have my very first, Beatles magazine from January 1964. I have everything. Why are those Polaroids not here with me? Because I kept such good care of them.
If I had to guess, Debbie, it's possible that the military or the government or someone was watching the SETI show, and they said, "We need to see those photos," and they may have been confiscated because they should have been returned to you. Normally, they would have been returned to you.
Yeah.
That's just such a wonderful story. Let me know if you want to be regressed. Maybe we can figure out. Have you ever been body scanned? Because, do you have any little nubs in your body that feel like maybe something was implanted?
No, I've never been body scanned except going through TSA. Oh, no, I did have a CT scan once, but I don't know if that would show it, but
well, they're usually very tiny little little tiny metallic nubs. If you've been scanned, it would beep. It would go off and set off a beeper. Probably even at an airport as well. This is great. Between your Beatles and your UFO landing, you're one of my favorite people, Debbie. Here, this is Debbie's book. I saw them standing there. DebbieGendler.com, right?
Right.
DebbieGendler.com. You can see right there.
And can I add something with them looking at the cover?
Sure.
That picture was me the day after I related that Meeting the Beatles story. And the book I am reading, at the end, I was led down the freight elevator when I left by Neil Aspinall, the Beatles road manager.
Right.
And when we got to the lobby floor in the freight, he pulled out of his jacket this book. It had just been published, John Lennon's second book, A Spaniard in the Works. And Neil gave it to me and said, "From us for your Beatles collection."
Very cool.
Because it went along with all the trash I had collected This was the day after in my bedroom back in New Jersey, looking at the book they
That's
gave
great.
me.
Look how young you are. I have John's first book in his own right. I think it's called. Right.
Yes.
Someone gifted that to me.
You can see it. It's there in the bottom under the O of Ringo.
Oh, yeah. There it is.
You see that? There's the cover of that.
Sure.
And then here's the new one. My dad took this picture of me the day after.
It's a great book. If you're a Beatles person like I am, read this book. She has wonderful stories. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for sharing your time with me today. This will air Thursday night. And between your Beatles and your UFOs, you have if you were into the JFK assassination, Debbie, then you and I would have all three things. Those are my three favorite things.
Oh, you never asked me about the JFK assassination.
Oh, well, I don't have time. I don't have time now, but
another time.
Next time we'll do Delhi again, and then we'll talk about. I've been studying that for about 45 years. So, thank you so very much. Be well. I hope your book sells 1 million copies. And thank you for watching from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. Debbie, just stay 1 second. Make sure everything uploads. I'll see you next week. Thank you very much.